Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 19th episode of your new favorite internet show, Visioncon Live. I'm your host, Zach Wilson, but you didn't come here to see me today. You came to see the man of the hour. He's Kaneki from Tokyo Ghoul, Karma from Assassination Classroom, Goro from Darling in the Franxx, just to name a few. He's a legend in his field with hands down the best beard in the business. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome the one, the only, Austin Tindle. Austin, how you doing today?
Good, man. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Austin, I'm going to be honest with you. It didn't occur to me until, I want to say about 20 minutes before we started, because, obviously I do a lot of research with all my guests. So, I've watched a lot of videos, with you in them. And, it didn't dawn on me until now that you've been in these videos with the beard and without the beard. So 20 minutes before we started, I thought to myself, oh, crap, what if he doesn't have the beard? My whole intro's ruined.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a beautiful beard.
Oh, definitely.
It's still arguably better than other beards, I think. So you're still safe in my book.
Oh, yeah.
But I did for public safety reasons, I got rid of the big one.
Sure.
Plus, I not having access to the person who I regularly get haircuts from. That was also the person that was kind of shaping it and making it look acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
When you have facial hair at that length, there's a very fine line between looking like a hipster or looking just completely homeless.
Sure. I mean, but you just have great roots in your facial hair, because I was worried, you'd be clean shaven. I'd be like, all right, well, I guess I'll think of an intro on the spot. But, enough about your facial hair. Austin Tindle, like I said, legendary voice actor and performer. What I want to know, though, while we begin, how did we get here? Was this kind of always the dream, or did something happen later in your life that led you down this path?
I never thought I was going to be a voice actor specifically. I did do a lot of theater in high school. And then when I went to college, I was studying to be an electrical engineer, and I got through about 3 years before I switched majors at the last moment to do a degree called Arts and Performance. So I spent a lot of time doing theater, and then I knew I wanted to do something in that area. I think I really wanted to do more film when I was younger. I wanted to be in the movies. And I really did just happen to fall into getting to work with Funimation just because I knew so many people in the community. And it just kind of grew from there. But now I love voice acting, and it's just like any other acting, except, you don't have to worry about like looking as good, which is nice.
Of course. I mean, acting is in the name. I mean, you guys do just as many acting, skills, jobs, and, all the facets of acting as, actors like, Tom Hanks or insert other actor or actress here. So do you find it hard in a way? And let me elaborate in the fact that sometimes you guys record just by yourselves in the booth and, the sound engineer, but, with other actors, that act, like on stage or whatever, they can usually play off one another. You, though, you definitely have to use more of your imagination in that. So does that present unique challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a weird thing. It's completely different than being on stage. One of the greatest things about getting to do theater specifically is an uninterrupted scene that you get to have with a scene partner where the two of you can really have a chance to create something organic by just letting go and responding to each other, which is what we do as children when we're all playing on the playground. And essentially that's, I think, at the heart of what entertainment is. It's like humans acting out and telling stories and playing so that we can learn more about ourselves as a species. But when you're alone in the booth, it's at least for me, I know that having done a lot of theater, I was able to understand what my internal mechanisms were like. So I have an idea of what I sound like when I'm truly sad, and I know where that lives in my body. So getting back to that place ends up being like a muscle thing. It's like doing yoga, so it's a lot of like trying to be present, sensitive, aware, and then allowing your body to naturally float into the place that it's supposed to be. But it is all based on your imagination for the most part, and I would say the director's intent, because at the end of the day you are just like a your data entry, your studio musician. You're there to help someone else with their interpretation of how this thing is supposed to be told. It's not like in a play or in a movie where you're creating a new character and you might have more influence on how that character naturally responds to something. For the most part, we're trying to recreate the intent of the Japanese creators to the best of our ability. And my job specifically is to just do what I'm told in terms of the director's vision of how things are going to happen. So very often you'll end up in a conversation with someone where they haven't recorded yet. So the director is there kind of deciding how hot each response is going to be. You know, my answer to your question is going to change depending on how you say the question. So it's it can sometimes be a less organic process, but you know, it is all still just imagination. And what you lack in a scene partner, you get back sometimes in the fact that these things are usually already animated and they already have other actors voicing them. So those are things that you can get a lot of influence from in terms of how you might respond.
Okay, that's an interesting way to look at it. Well, you know, you've done this job for, you know, years. So what do you think was your first big break? The one that you consider, at least, the first one that kind of puts you on the
map? It's hard to say, but I mean, I got a chance to play Alzac Connell in Fairy Tale, which is a really small part, but doing that allowed me to work enough with Tyler Walker that he felt safe enough to cast me in Is This a Zombie?, which was my first leading role. And then that kind of opened me up to new directors, and eventually led to Tokyo Ghoul, which was the biggest show I think I've probably done in terms of shows that I've had a large role in. And for the most part now, for the past like 5 years, I spend the majority of time talking about that or Attack on Titan or Assassination Classroom. So I guess more than anything, those probably are the three that have shaped my life.
And we'll
so far.
definitely get to those in a minute, guys. And ladies and gentlemen, before we continue, I just want to say, if you guys are watching this live here on Facebook, go ahead and put your comments and questions either in the live chat or message Visioncon directly, because at the end of this, I'll open it up to viewers' comments and questions. But with that said, we'll go ahead and continue, because I said that we'll touch on those big ones, and we will, don't get me wrong, but I did want to draw light and attention to one role that you played rather recently, within the last few years, that I actually started getting into as early as last night. And it was interesting because I didn't realize you actually played this character until I heard your voice. But my girlfriend and I were watching the show, and I was loving it. But then this main character starts talking, and I'm thinking, wow, this character sounds really familiar. And then sure enough, at the end credits, it's you. And that character is one Setagawa from, and I wrote this down, ladies and gentlemen. I love the show so far, but one of the words in it I can hardly pronounce, so bear with me. We got Hito Ri May.
Oh, yeah.
Did I get it?
Yeah. Hito Ri
Nailed it. So kind of how was it playing that role? I mean, it's a great kind of, you know, romantic comedy with some other serious elements in it as well. And guys, I highly recommend you guys checking it out. But, you know, kind of how was it playing the lead in that?
That was awesome. That was done at Sentai, which was in Houston. which is always crazy because that usually means that I drive down there, and we recorded the entire season in 2 days, maybe 3 days.
Wow.
So it's like 8-hour days of nonstop, and they use the chase method over there. So instead of like going queue to queue, we just start playing the episode, and then I'm like a second behind the entire time, just kind of throwing out everything. So a lot of the stuff ends up being your first or only take. But what was really interesting about recording that is, first of all, David Wald is the director, who is an amazing director, and he comes from a background that is similar to mine in terms of theater and process. So he really understands me as an actor, which is awesome. And he decided that there's some of the more intimate scenes between the two separate main love connection
Yes.
relationships. There's a few intimate scenes that they all have that doesn't involve a lot of dialogue overlap or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually set about to attempt to record them together. So David Wald and I recorded our parts in the room together, like all the really intimate moments that we have. And nobody ever does that in anime. It's very rare. But it was a joy to be able to like play with another actor inside a space like that. And we weren't like looking at each other or anything, because they still had to block off the sound, because they need two separate isolated recordings that they can mess with. And we're still matching flaps as we're doing this, so it was a pretty insane endeavor. And it's something that's probably too complicated for people to attempt to do on a regular basis, but it was really effective for those scenes. We were basically on either side of a giant, thick curtain, but we could hear each other and we could play off each other. It was cool, man. It's fun. And that show's so emotional too. It's so fun playing with all that repressed, anxious puppy love.
Anxious feelings, puppy love, but like, yeah, and it's a very endearing and very like deep story, while also remaining light and having those levity moments. But I was very impressed by the show, because I immediately I went into it because my girlfriend wanted to watch it, and I was like, oh, okay, why not? And I loved it. We're gonna finish it probably later this week, but we got it in about half into it. But then I noticed why that character's voice sounded so familiar is because you voiced him. But I definitely can see how you do that. Kind of doing it in pairs for those scenes are as effective, because I made a mental note about that. I was like, they really do go the extra mile, it sounds like, with those scenes. So I was very impressed, and I do recommend all of you guys checking out the show. I will put it in the description below, because I'm sure I brutalized and mutilated the actual pronunciation of the name. But the next one I want to talk about, we'd be remiss if we didn't. Let's talk about Tokyo Ghoul. A little backstory. When I first heard that the show came out, completely and utterly wrote it off. I kind of thought it was just kind of the edgy, clickbaity, thing that the teens are into. But, ladies and gentlemen, Austin Tindle, there was a girl. It was her favorite show at the time. So I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'll watch it. It looks great. So it didn't really work out with me and this girl, but I binged the entire series. It was so good. Had so much more depth than I ever thought possible for a show with an interesting premise. So what was your experience with the show? Was there any interesting tidbits as to how you got the role, and just, all of the above?
I auditioned for the role, which doesn't always happen, but I'm pretty sure it was a few lines, and then like they always have you record like 5 or 6 cues as the character when they're having you audition. And I think the last cue that they had us audition for, it just told you to scream. and that's basically what the show was about. I think I had just finished doing a certain magical index. So I think I had shown that I was capable of not burning out too quickly. Because that's screaming that often is an athletic endeavor. And my voice is like permanently
Scarred.
deeper after having done those two shows. Uh, I burnt through that really quickly. That's why I'm not the best person to ask for advice in terms of like vocal warm-ups or sustaining without hurting yourself. Like people are like, how do you make those sounds without hurting yourself? I don't. I just actually hurt myself.
Sure.
Uh, but when I got the part, I was like, I had just quit my job and moved into my girlfriend's van. So like I was in a very chaotic environment when I started recording it, and over the course of finishing it, because it took us like over 4 years before we recorded all the way through Tokyo Ghoul Re, my life had changed so dramatically, and that's right when I started getting invited to cons, which was a new thing for me. So it's pretty crazy to see just there may be some parallel to the character arc that Kaneki went through, and then just my own personal chaos as a human being. And it is kind of a mind fuck too. Oh, excuse me.
It's a pretty lax show.
To be regularly kind of expressing and performing that attitude, and that because it's a fairly melodramatic show.
Sure.
But I do think it speaks a lot about trauma on a metaphorical level, and I think that's why a lot of people respond to it. So there was a lot of me, like even working out my own shit as I was recording a lot of that show. And it went on for so long that it's definitely the longest project I've ever worked on. It's rare, especially with anime, that you get to, work with a character for that long. I mean, there are these shows, there are these like Dragon Ball,
sure.
One Piece shows where you get cast as somebody and then you're going to be doing that at least once a year forever. But most of the stuff that I've been in is like 2 seasons max. And even this was only technically 3 seasons, I guess. Maybe 4. But it was a long time to spend working on something.
Well, and you bring up the fact that, the show is, it definitely does have kind of melodramatic moments and such, but I will say, if there was ever a show where the protagonist just needs to be cut a break, it would definitely be Kaneki and Tokyo Ghoul. Because, I mean, come on, just like every couple episodes, just something like horrific happens to the boy, and he just kind of has to power through it, and it all kind of, I hesitate to say, works out in the end. It has a happy-ish ending to it, which I appreciated. But you said it yourself, you were in a very precarious situation, when it first started, when you got the role. And so the fact that, you're doing, far better now, do you tie a lot of that to Tokyo Ghoul? And is that why Kaneki and just kind of the whole story itself will always kind of resonate with you?
I mean, in terms of its performance, what resonated the most was his internal growth emotionally. And there's so many moments where, the specific context of what's happening is him like, needing to eat humans or transferring into something or almost dying or almost killing someone. But the specific dialogue that's being spoken is often easy, I think, to relate to, and there's there's moments towards the end of season 1 where he's when Rize's like giving him crap about his mom, and there's all these things that he's saying to his mom, like all of that, just the dialogue alone. And when you're recording it, you're going cue by cue. So there's just these little moments that you spend, that you make a universe out of with each passing line. So like stuff like that was like cathartic to express, and to the journey, the story, like most shows and most stories of self-actualization is him coming over the trauma of past experience and learning how to internalize that and use it for good. And so that progression, I think it's easy to relate to, and there is some parallel in that I did like end up with my own apartment somewhere in the middle of season 2, and so I was like climbing the hierarchy of needs and able to actually care about other people and not just myself. So yeah, there's definitely some parallel there in terms of my personal growth.
And I will say, I personally have experienced people that, Kaneki as a character, and just, the entire show, don't get me wrong, but specifically Kaneki and your performance with him has just completely resonated with them. I have a friend named Amanda, and she had, when I found out, that you were interested in being on the show, I told her, because I saw her socks that had Kaneki on them, and I was like, hey, I'm interviewing his voice actor. And she lost it. She was so excited. And, plenty of other friends that I've had who just loves the show, for its other assets and factors, don't get me wrong. But, Kaneki, or really your performance with Kaneki, is just, it feels so real. It feels so, genuine, and just, it's very easy to connect to, like you said, which kind of segments my way to my next question. I kind of want to talk about a show that it has darker elements to it, but not necessarily eating people to stay alive level. Let's talk about Assassination Classroom. Now, you voice the resident bad boy turned lovable, whatever, anti-hero, I'd say, Karma. Kind of, how fun was it? Was it as fun of a role as it kind of sounded like you were having with it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. He doesn't. The only thing that was annoying is he doesn't show up enough. Most episodes he would like be there at the beginning and then he'd pop in at the end to say something snarky. But it's always fun to be the wry, sarcastic one. I remember, luckily enough, when we recorded that, it was before we were doing broadcast dubs, because the first episode that I recorded, I had a whole different voice that I was doing, which was nasally and obnoxious and kind of like bratty. And it wasn't until like the third episode that I kind of like figured something else out. And Apia Yu was directing at the time, and she and I went back and just re-recorded all the other old episodes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but it could have sounded completely different, and it would have been much more obnoxious, I think. But yeah, what an odd character. They don't explain enough of what's going on with him, in my opinion. Early on, we see him fling himself off a cliff at one point, and he's got this like suicidal ecstasy. And then the next thing you know, the show's over and he's planning to become a politician. So I guess it makes sense.
It did definitely, it left more to be desired as far as Karma's story and kind of character arc was concerned. I mean, I like how it wrapped up, but, I do agree, I definitely would have asked for more Karma than, maybe some other of the characters. But, you had to tailor his voice to kind of work better with the character, and then obviously, you re-recorded those scenes. Do you find yourself doing that a lot? Is that kind of something that commonly happens, or is it just kind of a case?
What, like, are you saying like crazy characters? Do I find myself doing a lot?
No. What I mean is, so you do a character in a certain voice, but then later down the line, you evolve that voice. Is that something that kind of happens commonly, or was that just kind of a case-by-case thing?
I think there's some degree of settling in, but definitely not to the degree that we were able to recreate that voice. I don't think that happens very often, especially with anime, because most stuff these days is being simuldubbed. So, if you figure out a better voice by episode 3, like, it's too late. We've already got the first episode on the internet. But there's always some shift that happens, I think. Of course, I don't end up like playing a wide variety of character voices. I mean, like, essentially Karma and Kaneki are not very different in their pitch or their tone, or their, or like it's still my basic mannerism of dialogue. It's just maybe I'll put it slightly differently in the mouth, and a lot of it's just like emotional intent. Kaneki's always very sincere, and Karma isn't.
Sure.
But essentially, they're not. I'm not Tax Avery over here.
Sure. Well, another character I wanted to discuss, and kind of, he definitely, I would say, differs from Kaneki and Karma, at least to a degree. And it's also an anime that I would say, in the sense of tone, it would definitely be somewhere between Tokyo Ghoul and Assassination Classroom. And that, of course, is Darling in the Franxx. We're going to talk a little bit about Goro. So, Goro, he kind of at first comes across as someone who's got to, stick up their butt and kind of the big brother of the group. And then, as all the characters in that story, they undergo a big character arc. And so kind of, was there any memorable moments, voicing Goro, which is kind of the whole Darling in the Franxx process?
I don't know. I mean, it was really fun working with Cliff, the director. And it was, in general, it was nice to have a show that felt more grounded in like human conflict.
Sure.
Which I wasn't expecting at first from a mech show, which I generally am not super motivated by large robot shows. But there was something beautiful and kind of Lord of the Flies about all of these characters. I just remember working with Cliff. He was very specific, and he really wanted to get something that was as grounded in reality as possible. And we spent a lot of time working on that.
Sure. Well, you've voiced so many characters throughout the years. Like I always say with most of the guests that we have on the show, if I went to your IMDb page and talked about every single character, we'd be here all day, possibly 2 days. But throughout the years, were there any characters that really, aside from Kaneki, because we already kind of touched on that one, were there any other characters throughout the years that really have kind of resonated with you? And like at the end of the day, you hang your hat on and just kind of has stuck with you through the years?
Well, I try to relate to all the characters that I've played, but it's with a lot of the stuff, it's hard to really get a feel for that character because you don't spend that much time with it. There's a ton of shows that I've done where I said those words maybe 3 or 4 times, and then, didn't think about it or see it for years. So it's hard to hold on to some of those memories. And it's hard to have a connection to something that you didn't get to spend a lot of time on. I would definitely forgot for a little bit that I was in Sarah for the End. I was completely convinced that I wasn't in that show.
Wow.
I just, I just didn't actually show up that often in the show. Uh, so it's it's hard to answer. I do enjoy the rare instances where I get to play something that is far away from my natural speaking voice. So in Michiko and Hachin, I have this little tiny character that I play called Masao. Um, or in Eld Live, I play this big purple mustachioed alien named Isaac. And those are fun to do. Uh, and I'm always grateful that I get a chance to do something ridiculous or not. So I'm always like worried about the fact that I very often don't do anything to modify my voice for a character. But how many different voices can you have for, a 17-year-old who suddenly gets superpowers without it being disingenuous?
And why fix
But
it?
gosh, who else? I'm trying to think if there's um
There's so many. So
yeah, there's and they're all my children and I love them all. I love doing the harem comedies. Um and a lot of that work has been fun and it's a very comfortable place for me to play in. But I also will always really enjoy having done Snow White with the red hair. And Obi is the character I played in that show, and I had a lot of fun doing that. And that's the kind of, you know, that's the kind of show that you can show more people to. You can show, family members. Or another one would be My Roommate is a Cat. I really love that show. That one really speaks to me. And I recorded that right after Tokyo Ghoul was officially wrapped up. And I even got a cat after I started doing the show.
aw, that's so cute.
Yeah. Oh, she might be. She's outside right now, I think.
Ah, fair enough. But do you find that with each show that you do, you may while the character kind of grows as a character, you kind of yourself kind of undergo a little bit of the character growth, or is it easy to kind of separate yourself from those characters? Because you spend a decent amount of time with these characters, formulating voices, kind of making sure each should sound right. Is it possible that with each character you voice, you maybe kind of take after them in a way?
Um, I'd like to think that I've learned personal growth lessons from every hour that I spend in the booth. I don't know how uh, effective that really is, but it definitely can affect like the emotional landscape of that day for me. And nowadays, nowadays I record like an hour a week in a closet. But even up before the pandemic, it was, you, if I'm lucky, I'll get maybe 2 or 3 hours booked with Funimation per week. So it doesn't take up that much of my actual life, but I think any actor working on Attack on Titan can tell you that like doing a show like that on a regular basis can make your day depressing, but certainly not as all encompassing as it is to like I played Claudio in Measure for Measure on stage one time, and like that dude, he's about to get murdered because he had sex with his girlfriend, and the bishop that runs the town basically sentences him to death. and he's got this horrible monologue that he has to go through, and I used to just abuse myself during the rehearsal process and the run through that show. So stuff like that can weigh more heavily than something where you can, like, you only have to do it a couple times and you can move on. It's not like reliving that traumatic event over and over again.
Uh,
Luckily.
It must be rough, though, which
But
unfortunately, and somehow kind of segues my way to my next question. Well, we've noticed a lot of people who watch the show. Yes, of course, they're here for, you know, the amazing guests that we have, but a lot of them are also interested in either getting into voice acting or have already taken some steps to get there, but kind of are just looking for the next few tips on becoming, you know, one day might become the next Austin Tindle. So I did want to ask you 2 questions that I always try to ask, you know, towards, you know, the middle of each video. Rejection. Found everywhere in life, you know, but I will say, compared to most industries, I would say the entertainment industry, it is found a lot more than compared to other industries. So I wanted to ask you, who is a very successful and very well-known performer, how do you kind of deal with rejection? Does it get any easier, or are there any tips that you could give the folks watching at home?
it never gets easier. I mean, it's easier to get to a place to not take it personally, because the worst thing you can do to yourself is what I did, which was spend my entire 20s like completely worried about what I was supposed to look like, because I thought that my success was limited because I didn't fit into a certain mold. And in reality, like, that attitude is the thing that's slowing you down and stopping you from figuring out where you're useful. Because there's, you know, there's all shapes and sizes and ranges of things that are needed for storytelling. So you don't have to look or sound like someone else. If anything else, they need, you know, your unique, natural, unedited voice or face, I guess. But you know, yeah, it gets easier over time when you start to learn that it's just the nature of a buyer's market.
I mean, you did
And
bring
it's
up,
random. It's also very random in a lot of ways. A lot of things are very random. In terms of like getting a good role, like, there's a ton of like, I just auditioned for a character that I really, really want to get, and I probably won't. I did that this morning. And it's gonna suck when I don't get it, if I don't get it. But also, not getting a role is not as bad as getting the role and then doing and not being right for it, and having everyone resent you for screwing up their favorite character.
I mean, that's a good way to look at it. And everybody watching at home right now, keep your fingers crossed that Austin Tindle gets that unnamed role from the unnamed project. But there was something that you said that I'm curious if we could explore a little more, if that's okay with you. And that is, I mean, you had that, you know, destructive kind of, you know, limiting mindset for, you know, for a while that kind of, you know, stopped you from, you know, maybe climbing the ladder of success as quickly. Kind of what was the kicking point? How did you get out of that mindset? And for anybody watching at home, do you have any tips as to how to, you know, just get out of that limiting mindset?
I had a lot of most of the effective training that I have received was actually with a program called Shakespeare and Company in Lenox, Massachusetts, and they it was a month-long intensive that I took, where we would spend like 8 hours a day every day just working on the craft. And the first like 4 hours of the day was all about, you know, kind of getting in your skin, becoming fully aware of yourself, and living in your body. uh, and there's a lot of techniques that I learned there that became very effective for me, and most of them you can read about in there's a book called uh, what's it called? It's called Freeing the Natural Voice or Unleashing the Natural Voice by Kristen Linklater. But there's a bunch of techniques in there about mindfulness, about making yourself present and sensitive and aware. And there's like, in there is the heart of all the difficult stuff you need to be successful as an actor in terms of, accomplishing the task you've been hired to do. Like getting hired to do the task, there's no easy way to make that happen, because there's plenty of times when you might be right for the role, but there are other people that are right for the role, and there's so many factors involved in you getting hired for something that's going to be fulfilling. What was your question again? Did I answer that?
The question was, and I think you effectively answered it, but how did you get out of that kind of limiting mindset? And
oh yeah, well, I mean, you don't really. You come back to it on a regular basis, but um, uh, the practice of like just becoming aware of your breath and your posture. So when I'm in moments of extreme anxiety, especially like in the job arena, like if I'm like in a cattle call for a commercial that I really want to get and I'm feeling nervous, I will try to focus my energy on something productive. So I'll try to like this frontal lobe that's constantly criticizing every aspect of you, like try to train it to serve you. So in moments like that, I try to focus on things that I can control, uh, like like my stance. If I'm standing in the room, I'll check to see if the 3 points of my feet are touching the ground evenly. I'll try to make tripods with my feet. With the 2 balls and the heel is 3 points, 6 total points that I'll try to stack under me. And then I'll make sure that my knees and my hips and my shoulders are all stacked and aligned. And then I will try to relax my body so that I can stand like that while using as least amount of energy as possible. And then I'll start to focus on my breath, and I'll try to get into a zone where I can sense my breath without controlling it, which is like technically not possible, but it's kind of it's like a Zen technique that could be considered at the heart of all acting, because that moment of breath is thought and inspiration and action, and that's that's what we're doing as actors. So being able to sense my breath without controlling it, and finding each inhale and exhale as an act of releasing tension as opposed to a decision that's being made. I'm not sitting here thinking I need to breathe in for 10 seconds and then I need to breathe out. I'm giving in to the desire to inhale until an overwhelming desire of exhale takes over, and I give into that. So that like I'm sitting there in the space, actively focusing on relaxing myself and giving myself tasks that also distract me from judging myself. And hopefully, if this is an audition space that you're in, you've done your homework, and so you don't need to be sitting here worried about what lines you're going to say or what your motivation is or what the context is of what you're doing. So it's like, do your homework, study, get rest, have a nice breakfast, show up, and try to chill out. But that's just me. There's all roads lead to Mecca. There's a bunch of different ways to help people tell a story as an actor. But anyway, so the judgment and the fear, those things always come back. And when they do, I try to focus on actions that will serve me.
So you can better combat it. I love that. But with that, guys, if you guys have not already, if you're watching this live here on Facebook, if you haven't already, go ahead and write your comments or questions either in the live chat or message Visioncon directly, because this is your last chance. Because, ladies and gentlemen, we're in the plug zone. Austin Tindle, now is your time to promote, plug, advertise, whatever verb you want to use. Anything you want. Links, websites, services, whatever you want, the floor is yours, sir.
My cat has an Instagram page where she writes haikus, and I'd love everyone to follow it. It's called Haikus by Haru. I forgot to tell you this one ahead of time.
No worries.
Haikus by Haru, HaikusByHaru. Check it out. She's a budding artist. Or you can find me on Austin Tindle, at Austin Tindle, anywhere. Or on Instagram, if you go to @NotAustinTindle, that's where I'll be posting convention appearances and things like interviews and stuff like that.
And guys, if you're watching this on Facebook, all of those links are going to be in the chat, minus the haikus with Haru. But if you're watching this later on YouTube, that'll be on the description down below. And you also have Cameo, correct?
Oh yeah, I have Cameo. So if you want a video, come find me. I guess it's just Austin Tindle. Cameo/Austin Tindle. I don't know. It's there's a link to it in the bio in my Instagram.
Yeah. And if you don't already follow him, it's also going to be in the live chat on Facebook or down below on YouTube. And with that, guys, we're out of the plug zone. And we're going back to you, viewers, comments, and questions. So I'm going to bounce it out like I always do, 50-50 from the messenger and 50-50 from the live chat. So give me just 1 sec to pull that up, guys. All right, so first up, we've got Amanda, who wrote in and asked, what is it like voicing such an emotional and traumatic character like Kaneki? He has so much depth. What was going through your head? I feel like that would be interesting, being alone when voice acting. So we kind of touched on that a little bit earlier, but maybe more of an in-depth about Kaneki as a character. Kind of how was your kind of headspace when voicing Kaneki?
I mean, I guess I've been lucky in that I've gotten a chance to play a lot of tortured characters, so I'm familiar with the landscape of personal torment. So it gets down to mostly technique. Like when you're in the booth, there's some, there's some amount of sense memory drawing from like my own personal trauma, and there's some amount of organic material that can be brought to the table. But for the most part, it ends up being technique, and it ends up being a muscle that like gets flexed more easily the older I get. I remember when I was younger, when I was in like high school, I was constantly trying to force myself to be able to cry on cue. Like that was like a really big deal for me. I thought it meant that I was a good actor. So I spent a lot of time kind of just in, not only in that headspace, but also physically, the things that you can trigger around your face and your throat that adjust the way that you say things. It ends up being kind of second nature. But there's also something I just really naturally relish about some of those moments, those because there's something therapeutic about dipping into that reserve and pouring some of it out. So I would say there is maybe perhaps some like resolve and catharsis that I had experienced from going through those and getting out on the other side. And now that I have finished those things, I do feel less of a desire to go back and relive them. I don't think I'd want to have to re-record all of those intensely emotional moments. But there's something about Kaneki that's just so human in his fear of himself and his isolation. So I guess that's at the heart of what maybe resonated with me and what made it an accomplishable task. I don't know if that helped answer the question.
Oh no, I think you did great. I mean, he's a very interesting character. I mean, that goes without saying. But he's also one that's very easy to root for, especially when he's faced with such adversity, seemingly every day. But Alan wrote in and wanted to know, have you always been a fan of anime, or did that come after you started voicing characters in anime?
I was probably a bigger fan of anime before I started voicing characters, honestly. Like, I watch less anime now than I used to, and it's kind of harder to keep up with things these days. But when I was growing up, I would stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning and watch like Dragon Ball Z every night. I was a big fan of Fooly Cooly when I was a kid. I was really in love with that show, and I watched all the Miyazaki films and Ninja Scroll and Vampire Hunter D when I was young, and my dad and I would go to Blockbuster, and he would rent some of the real, back in the day you could get some VHS of some gory, like barely subtitled, just nasty tentacle-y stuff out there that you could like find at random Blockbusters, and I spent a lot of my childhood watching stuff like that. And it's funny too, because it never occurred to me that I could be doing what I'm doing today when I was like watching that. I would watch Dragon Ball Z in English, but now I know all those fucking people, and that's super weird. I never once would have thought that it just didn't occur to me that was an option. I got really into theater in high school, and at that point, anime was more in the background. And then I kind of heard about Funimation when I moved to Dallas. But yeah, these days, man, I don't watch very much, and I definitely don't watch my own stuff. I'll study a show enough to like get an idea of what's going on, but after that, I'll exercise willful ignorance and kind of not tell myself what's happening.
Sure. Interesting. Well, Jared Williams wrote in and wanted to tell you, Karma was one of his favorite characters that you brought to life. There was so much we didn't get to see of the character. If you could have written an episode about him and his story, what would you have liked to add and explore?
If I got an extra character or an extra episode with the character, I don't know. I guess I'd want to see some flashback to what was happening with him right before he shows up. Maybe there's some earlier rival that isn't shown in the TV show that we get to see him going against. I'd like to see him do something nastier than just put wasabi up someone's nose. I want to know if he really has murdered someone before. I want to see his first kill.
That would be a great one, and I was surprised that we never really explored that one too much. But that was an excellent question, Jared. We'll say, Michelle Horner-Clay coming in clutch. She put Haru's Instagram on the in the live chat. Thank you, Michelle. Nice. You're amazing. Okay, Marissa McGuire wrote in and said, I'm new to watching anime, just started seriously getting into it this year during quarantine. One of the first ones she watched was My Roommate is a Cat, and I just fell in love with it because it's so mundanely heartwarming. I can relate to Subaru so much dealing with depression, social anxiety, and being a shut-in. A few years ago, I got a cat, and that was really helped me in dealing with that. I just really connected with Subaru, and that anime is so special to me. Thank you so much, dude.
Aw, that's nice to hear. That show means a lot to me, too, for the exact same reasons. there's like a whole episode where he's just trying to get up the gumption to go to the grocery store. And I get that.
I mean, like, this is what I'm saying, though. I mean, you have voiced, I mean, all these characters, you know, at least one person has been resonated by each of these characters. I mean, obviously, you are Austin Tindle, so one person, it's more like hundreds or thousands. But, you know, it's very heartwarming to hear, I'm sure. Do you ever kind of, like, is that ever something that ever gets old, or do you just love always hearing those stories?
No, it's always nice to be appreciated. Absolutely. It's wonderful to hear that those performances have had an impact on other people. But I try not to let it get to my head because, you know, I don't necessarily have a lot of responsibility in the success of this thing that means so much to other people. You know, I mean, it was written by someone and animated by many people, and performed by someone else before me. And all of those factors came in before I showed up as, like, you know, glorified subtitles. So a lot of my career these days has been me accepting the gratitude and being kind of the mascot or face, or point of contact for people who really appreciate these things that resonated in their lives, that they get to own and rewatch and re-listen to on a regular basis. And I'm very grateful that I got to be a part of it. And it is humbling to regularly get to accept the gratitude when, you know, I just showed up at the end. Took credit for it.
Sure. Well, that's a good way to look at it. All right, guys, we have time for 2 more questions. So Aaron wrote in and said, speaking of Snow White, how do you think Obi would get along to Regina, the Evil Queen, and Snow White and Prince Charming's daughter, Emma Swan? And then he said, I met Lana Parrilla, forgive me if I mispronounced that, and Jennifer Morrison from Once Upon a Time. So I believe his question is, so how would Obi get along with Regina the Evil Queen and Snow White and Prince Charming?
I don't know. I think Obi would be polite and evasive. And I think he has a lot of respect for royalty, out of an obligation and a code of honor, even though he may not have personal affection towards these people.
That's fair. Well, Amy McLaughlin actually came in and she said, gonna watch this cat show now, and she added it to her queue, apparently.
Oh, you got to watch the show. It's very cute, and it was a great show to get to work on after finishing Tokyo Ghoul, because it is so different, but it still deals with loss and personal growth on a deep level that I remember there's so many parts of that show, My Roommate is a Cat, where during the recording I would, like, find myself choking up, and I would have to, like, redo a take because, like, the actual character's not that emotional, and especially not that outwardly emotional. But it's a great show. Everyone should check it out.
Well, that's incredibly sweet, too. All right, we got last question. This is from Tabitha. And before I read it, I just want to say, ladies and gentlemen watching this interview would not be possible if it had not been for Tabitha Whitelaw. She reached out to you, you agreed to be on the show. So we're very thankful for you for joining us. But also thank you so much, Tabitha, for making this possible. We love you dearly. And with that said, Tabitha wrote in and asked, wait, hold on. I lost it. There it is. Okay. So it is no surprise. Why isn't it not? Sorry, guys, a little technical difficulties. Where did it go? There it is. Okay. It's no secret that a lot of the Tokyo Ghoul fans that read the manga were upset by the anime, kind of straying away from the manga. Did you read the manga, and what were your thoughts on that? Tokyo Ghoul is one of my favorite animes, hands down.
Okay, so I've read some of the manga, especially right before we started recording Tokyo Ghoul Re. I read through a bit of it, and I was very confused and lost. And then I didn't finish it. I was perhaps like too overwhelmed by everything to sit down and actually read through all of it. And recording the last season, Tokyo Ghoul Re, was a very frustrating experience. They accelerated the storytelling so quickly that we often had difficulty immediately understanding what was going on, which is often the case when you're a dub actor, because knowing the full context of the story is not really as helpful as just knowing the intent of the line that you're about to speak. And in fact, in some ways, not knowing what's going on kind of makes it easier to give a pure line reading that's going to be closer to what the director is looking for based on the limited information they give you. What I forget what I was saying.
So, did you read the manga, which you did?
I read a little bit, but I didn't finish it.
And are we having a cameo appearance? Oh my God! Is that Haru himself?
Yep, here's Haru. Look, that's you.
Well, I can't think of a better way to end off on this. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have. So this has been episode 19 of Visioncon Live. Now, before we wrap things up, Austin, Tindle, any final thoughts or anything you want to leave us out on?
Stay safe out there. Wash your hands. And follow me on all the social media, because then I feel loved more. And it's important for internet points.
There you go. Links in live chat, or if you're watching this later on YouTube, down below. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, this has been episode 19 of Visioncon Live. Make sure to come with us and tune in next week, July 27th, which is a Monday, at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time for my interview with Bryson Bogus, voice actor behind the roles of Mitsuru from Darling in the Franxx, Belle from Is It Wrong to Try and Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon, Hinata from Haiku, and plenty more. But until next time, guys, I'm your host, Zach Wilson, but much more importantly, this has been my special guest, Austin Tindle. You guys stay safe out there, and always remember, guys, that life's better when you have friends to share it with.